Now on the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com. Joining us now, the managing editor of the TexasFootball.com and Dave Campbell's Texas Football, Travis Stewart. How you doing, Travis?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there. How about y'all?
Doing very well, by the way. Thank you very much. I got my copy of Texas Football, the winter edition, last week. It was everything you said it would be and more.
Well, we spent a lot of time into it, and I think the biggest thing about it was, we had a Heisman winner last year with Robert Griffin. We had another one this year with Johnny, and we wanted to try and continue to grow and evolve what this winter magazine is entirely. I mean, the summer one is a pretty known commodity, the big one that comes out in June, the 400-page monster. It's a preview book, and it's probably always going to be a preview book. I mean, that's what's going on at that time of the year. But the winter magazine is a little different because it comes out a little later, so it's hard to do it as a straight review book, looking back at everything that happened. So it's always been kind of a mixture of reviewing and previewing and all that jazz. So we're really happy with how it turned out, and we're excited that that particular part of the brand continues to grow.
Very good. It was an outstanding magazine. I love the article on Johnny Manziel, actually the entire testimonial on Johnny Manziel. So that's good stuff. All right, I want to talk to you first of all about the guys who are headed for the High School Hall of Fame this year. Really cool, I thought, that both Sam Harrell and Graham Harrell are going to get to go into the Hall of Fame together.
Yeah, and when you talk about families of football in Texas, the Harrells are really up there on that hierarchy. I mean, it wasn't just those two. I mean, Clark was a pretty good player as well. There's been a lot of Harrells through the years, but I think what's really touching about this one is all the health issues that Sam has gone through over the past couple of years, and some of the trials and tribulations that's had, what that's meant for the family. It's kind of a nice close to the circle that both he and his son get in at the same time. A great coach and then a great player, obviously, but again, just for the emotional moment of putting them in together, I think that's got to be really rewarding to the family when it's probably much needed to have some good news and something to smile about sometimes.
Absolutely, no question about that. Talk about some of the other people that are in that class.
Well, it's a good one, when you look down the list, but the Harrells are really the top one. I think Paladuro linebacker William Thomas, I think that's maybe the next biggest guy, and then Cal Allen running back Wes Danaher, who's been a long-time record holder in the record books for rushing, but has started to be pushed out of the picture a little bit with the guys like Trey Williams and Jonathan Gray and some of the big names to come through as of late have put up the really big numbers. But those two guys really stood out to me, William Thomas and Wes Danaher, as two guys that really deserved to be there. And I think will be good installments moving forward.
I also, because I got to see him play in person a few times, I think about the barrier that Donny Little broke through, being the first black starting quarterback at the University of Texas. That was a real late in coming, by the way, but probably a tough position for him to be in.
Well, I mean, we talk so often about Jerry Levice at SMU and what he meant, to the Southwest Conference, but we forget a lot about, there was a player at Baylor who did more or less the same thing, just non-scholarship a couple years before, and then there was a player actually in the FCS level a couple years before that. That was the first black player, college player in Texas ever, I think, if I have my data correct. And then obviously you have Donny Little, and one of the reasons Donny stands out a lot, I think, was because Texas was one of the last programs to really integrate, and that's a dicey subject. A lot of people stay away from it, and that's just a mark of the times. But they were one of the last programs to really integrate that team, and I think in some ways some of those opinions and beliefs died hard in some of those circles. So when Donny finally got there and broke through one of the last big glass ceilings, I guess you could call it, broke through one of the last big glass ceilings there, I think it really ushered in part of the new era, and it was something that really needed to be ushered in.
Yeah, no question about that, and he set the way for it. So, and ever since then, not been a big deal. Okay, talk a little bit about recruiting. What's going on out there right now? What are you hearing? Who's walking away with everything? A&M pretty much taking their pick and leaving scraps for the rest?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, recruiting right now is a mess, and it always is in this last about week to 2 weeks before signing day because it's a mad scramble. Any school that's still trying to pick up a kid, whether he's committed somewhere else or not, they're going to give their best pitches now. This is usually a frenzied time for a lot of the big-name guys where there's even an inkling that they may still be available. maybe chief on that list would be DeSoto running back Dontre Wilson, who we called our Gridiron Legends Texas High School Player of the Year this season. You know, when Chip Kelly left Oregon, that's where he had been committed for a long time. He said he was still committed to Oregon, but he was going to look around and take his visits. And, I mean, everybody who's worth anything right now is going to make a run at him because of, obviously, his talent level. He's a great kid. He's smart. He can do a lot of things for your team. But knowing that he may be on the market, I mean, I'm sure his life right now is very busy and very hectic. I don't envy the shoes he stands in.
We also, yesterday here in East Texas, Tyus Bowser, who had committed to Oklahoma State a couple of days ago, decided to rescind that commitment yesterday. You're going to see a lot of that kind of mind-changing going on over these next weeks, couple of weeks anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tyus was in a weird situation because of basketball. He was a pretty good basketball player, and I think that was part of the issue with Oklahoma State, was that he wanted to play, and Oklahoma State essentially made him choose, if I read my media reports correctly. But, yes, there will be a lot of guys here at the last second changing, and that happens every year. There's always at least one major player from Texas who at the last second decides, you know what, I'm dropping this in favor of that, or I'm moving here in favor of there. That's the way it always works. I mean, it's just so many of these kids, they pledge, in some cases, a year ago, and you have an entire year of other schools chipping away at you. Eventually, something's got to give in a lot of cases.
Who is out there that's still completely uncommitted at this point that would be considered a 5-star or 4-star guy?
Well, 5-star, those guys are already all snatched up. By the Rivals' terms, we only had 1 or 2 5-star guys, and they've been long since taken care of. Alshon Robinson from Arlington Heights was a 5-star for a while. He's with Texas, and then Ricky Seals-Jones is obviously with Texas A&M. He's from Sealy. But as far as the 3-star guys, I mean, remember, I think Johnny Manziel was a 3-star, so you can always do pretty well in the 3-star range.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as guys that are still available, one guy who I really, really like is a wide receiver from Coppell, which is up here in Dallas.
Yep.
His name is Cameron Smith, and he kind of had an under-the-radar year because he didn't really do anything as a junior. He wasn't a big-time player as a junior. When he exploded as a senior, he has sensational talent. I think he's one of the top 10 wide receivers in the state. But because so many kids get recruited as juniors, it's hard for a guy who really breaks out as a senior. Wherever he goes, I think someone will be very satisfied with that. But I think that there's still I still think there's a kid to be had there. And then in the athlete ranks, for guys who are still lacking a firm position, I really like Edwin Mims from Dangerfield, who's right down the street from you guys.
Yep.
And then DeMarcus Ayers at Lancaster. Both of those guys are still open and available. And I've got to think that someone's going to take a chance on Edwin, and everyone's obviously looking at DeMarcus Ayers, and they'll be very happy with both of those guys.
Yeah, what would you say would be the strength position-wise of this class this year?
Well, defensive tackle is pretty darn good, and that's a good position to have strength at because everybody needs a defensive tackle. I mean, you've got to get at least one of those every year, and they're hard to find. So defensive tackle is pretty good. Offensive line is very good. There's a lot of really good offensive linemen this year. But if we're talking about the next class, 2014, there's one standout strength above all the others, almost lapping the field, and that's defensive back. When I was looking at the 2014 class and picking our top 50 guys for 2014 for our upcoming recruiting magazine, which we'll be selling digitally within our app, when you look at the class of 2014, I mean, half of those top 50 kids are defensive backs. It's a ridiculously loaded class next year in the secondary for teams that need those guys.
And you need them if you're playing Big 12 football.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those guys are going to end up, honestly, at Texas schools because, you know, in Conference USA, whatever that's going to look like next year with all the changes, Conference USA tends to be pretty wide open, too. So, you know, obviously the A&M is going to get the pick of the litter. They did this year. They cleaned up at safety. They're going to get their pick of the litter. It feels like right now they've already got a couple of those guys inked in or locked in for that next class. But a lot of those kids are going to end up at Texas schools where we need them pretty bad. Are
you keeping a real close eye on what the Big 12 is talking about in terms of what they might do if anybody else tries to expand conference-wise now?
Yeah, I've read all of Bob Bowlesby's, the commissioner's comments, and honestly he said exactly what he needs to say, which is, you know what, we're good right now. We're all really happy. This environment is working for us. Everyone's pulling in the same direction. If everyone else begins to add teams, we'll look at that. We're not going to aggressively pursue that until it becomes necessary for us to do it. But the one thing he said that I really liked, he said, you know, we're not in the interest of rating other conferences. We're not going to go out there and be contacting a bunch of schools to measure their interest. I think that's what he's saying. Mm-hmm. But what he did say was we're also never going to turn down a conversation from anybody that wants to have one. So if a school calls the Big 12 out of the blue and says, hey, would you be interested in having us jump ship over there, they're never going to turn away at the door and say no. They'll always at least listen and have the conversation. And that's kind of business in general. You should always at least have the conversation when the opportunity's there, even if you don't think anything will come of it. And Bowlesby and the rest of the Big 12, they seem like they're on that path, and that's a good one to have in this environment.
Do you believe there's anybody out there that would be a good fit for the Big 12 right now? That looks like they're kind of maybe somebody from Conference USA, for instance.
I don't know if there's a team out there that I would consider a great fit, at least when you factor in all the things like size and fan base and all those elements. TCU was stretching the boundaries a little bit when you think of the rest of the schools in there. Previously, Baylor had been one of the smaller schools in there. Now, if you throw aside size and everything like that, because when you bring in a smaller school, sometimes they're going to get smaller stature, and no school wants that. You create a little bit of discord there. When you throw away size and all those things, there's plenty of Texas teams that could be a great fit there. Houston and SMU would be just fine. People overlook SMU a lot because the football, while a lot better than it has been over the past couple of decades, is still middle of the road as far nationally. I think SMU has won the overall Conference USA competition for athletics several times in the past couple of years. They're very strong in other sports, and they have Larry Brown for basketball. And in some cases, that's a great fit, for the rest of the Big 12, which, while not right now, is not the strongest basketball conference. Typically, it's pretty decent. So those schools would probably be a fine fit, but when you look at the rest of the schools that are already in the conference, I don't see another one out there that really fits that size, personality, fan base that's a really, really good fit. The only one that may work, I guess, would be BYU, and then since that Texas has their own network, Oklahoma's desperately trying to get their own network and should, and BYU's already got one. So if you're looking to try and bring in schools that already have their own network, TV network, where you've got a lot of strings attached, a lot of things you have to sort out contractually for that, then I guess BYU makes sense.
And did I not see that Bowlesby said that the criteria for schools would be something along the lines of got to bring in $26 million to the conference in income?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Wow.
If you're Bowlesby and you're sitting there with a conference right now that has a history of discord over the past decade, if you're sitting with that conference and all of a sudden everything's peachy, if you're going to risk bringing in something that could disrupt the kumbaya feel of it, it better darn well be worth it. So I don't blame the stance. If there's a lot of people that are going to push for some of the Texas schools, lots of legislature people are going to be from, some of the other schools in Texas that are left out of the Big 12 picture. Everyone's going to push for those programs, but Bowlesby's essentially thrown down the sword or gauntlet that said, look, if you want to be a part of it, you have to guarantee us this much income or else it's not worth us to do it.
Interesting stuff. Okay, what's coming up with the magazine and the website now?
Well, the biggest thing we're working on right now is a special recruiting magazine. It's recruiting only because we pulled most of that stuff out of the winter magazine. We're putting it into a digital magazine. It'll be digital only for purchase within our apps on iPhones, Droid devices, and on Kindle Fires, through the Amazon store. So that should be on little racks, I guess is a figurative term now. That'll be within the app ready for purchase on about February 15th is what we're shooting for. It'll be a recap of the signing day we just finished, and then also including ranking all 12 FBS schools' classes in order. And then we'll also be taking a good look at 2014, 2015. Believe it or not, we even have a look at the class of 2016, which are kids that just finished their freshman year. So pretty good stuff if anyone's into it.
Very good. All right, Travis, thanks very much for coming on with us. We appreciate it. Again, great job on the winter magazine.
Thanks, bud.
All right. Travis Stewart from Dave Campbell's Texas Football, TexasFootball.com on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM.